Good evening and a warm welcome to all of you on this webinar this Friday. Like most of you know, every Friday from 5 to 5:30 we have webinars, walk-in webinars for early professionals to look at some of the new products, some of the introductory aspects of very many new products. So in this series today, we'll be talking about liability insurance. It's a very basic level introductory webinar. We will see how businesses are exposed to various types of risks or liabilities in their business. So this will help us to analyze and understand the need for liability insurance. Um, Liability as such is a very unique line of business. It is a very specialized kind of product where most of the insurance professionals they put in a lot of time and effort to learn the various nuances of the product. So in every insurance company, if you see, there is a specialized vertical for liability. Even the brokers and intermediaries, they function this way, that they have a very specialized vertical for liability. That is so because of the given sophistication of the product and the complications involved in the implementation or even sourcing of business. So it needs a very in-depth understanding, but nevertheless, today in this webinar, we will cover some of the basic fundamental concepts and the need, how the need arises for any business to take a liability insurance policy. So just to introduce myself, my name is Radhika and I've been part of the insurance industry for the last 30 years now. And I've served in all the roles, almost all the roles. I would say underwriting, operations, risk management, some amount of, reinsurance also, and more so in the marketing department. The major role period that I spent was in the marketing. And I was part of both retail and corporate marketing for many years. And I served both in the public sector and the private insurance company. So this is a brief background about me and about IRA Coaching. We are a 2-year-old training company, and we specialize in terms of insurance technical product training, as well as we also offer functional training on various business skills and soft skills. So this is a brief about IRA coaching and myself. So right now I'll share a presentation with you, which we will go through briefly to understand the topic for today. I hope my audio, video, and the presentation is clear. You could chat and let me know. All of you must be having a chat and a Q&A option on your phone or on your laptop. So you can use that to let me know. Right. Thank you very much. So right now the topic for us today is running a business amidst liabilities, right? How do we protect ourselves? So this is from the client point of view, we will discuss how important liability insurance is for running any business. So all businesses thrive around liabilities. There's liabilities all around. It can be to the customers, it can be to the regulators, and very many other stakeholders. We look at who are these stakeholders. It can be the employees, it can be the public, it can be the promoters, whichever way you see, there is liabilities all around if any business owner has to start a new venture or has even an established business. We'll look at it step by step. So right now, let's say somebody has a factory. What kind of liabilities can arise for him? Not just factory, for that matter, any business location. It can be a school, it can be a hotel, it can be, you know, well, let's say a software company, not just an industrial manufacturing company. It can be any kind of establishment or business where they function out of a premises. So there can be liabilities that can attach based on the premises on which they operate their business. It can be through the premises and operations that happen on the business premises. So how does liability really arise on the premises? Now, we all know as a company, as a business owner, they do have visitors to their office, right? There are visitors who keep coming to the office. An employee has negligently left a large box in the corridor, let's say, for an example. Now, you have an office, there is a office room where one of the employees by mistake has left a large, let's say he wants to send a courier, he's left a large box, but it's mainly lying on the corridor. If any visitor who's visiting the office or around the public places trips on it and fractures his ankle, he can make a claim allegedly saying, why have you put this box negligently on the corridor? Like the simple things, but they can sue for damages. It's not so very common in India, but this is a very, very common thing overseas. But nevertheless, one of the primary examples is how you maintain your premises, how you maintain your office, where any visitor who comes does not meet with any kind of accident. This much care has to be taken. Another important example where liability can attach is when the factory, because of the manufacturing process, exudes industrial waste, right? So there could be a lot of poisonous gas that gets emitted from the processing that happens within the industry. Now, this poisonous gas can spread around and cause a lot of diseases or ailments to the public who live around the industry. This is very, very common, right? We keep reading this, and of course, the most in fact, this kind of liability, which is called public liability, mostly this is towards the public who live around the factory. The public liability insurance itself evolved based on the leakage of gas that happened in India way back. So the industrial waste or the poisonous gas that gets leaked is something that's very dangerous, and it's important for industries to maintain a certain um, due diligence in ensuring that these do not harm the people living around the factory. Now, at the initial time of the lockdown post pandemic in, I think, April of March 2020, there's this famous accident that happened in Vizag, Vishakhapatnam of Andhra Pradesh. You must have heard about LG Polymers as a client. Now, this is a huge tragedy. See, because of lockdown, nobody visited the factories, right? Everything got locked up, and there were no proper inspections or visits that were happening even by employees to the factories, because everything was locked down and people had to be staying back at home. So in this particular unit, which actually deals with polymer manufacturing, there's a lot of chemical stuff that they store, and everything was unattended. And there was a situation where the, the again the poisonous fluid and the gas leaked out of the factory because of non-supervision, and it caused a huge amount of illnesses to the people living around that plant. So this led to a lot of public liability situation for the client. So, like we spoke about the Bhopal gas tragedy. The Bhopal gas tragedy was in fact the initiation, if I could say, for a public liability thought also. When that tragedy happened, nobody realized immediately also, but after many, even today, there are cases relating to the Bhopal gas tragedy that are being, fought in the court of law. So that is the level of impact or damage that particular tragedy made. And in Vizag, this also was reasonably bad. And it was unfortunate that many people, because the factory also was within the suburban limits within the main town, lot of residential complexes that were living around constructed around the factory, the people really suffered immense health issues. This was, sorry, May 7th, 2020. So that could be one situation where the public can go against the industry and make a claim and ask for compensation in a court of law. Another example for an industrial business owner can be the professional tools and structure damage that can be caused to any visitor. If you walk into any industry, obviously they use a lot of tools. They use the structural, pipes or the structures that are constructed within the industry. They can collapse and cause any kind of injury to the people who are visiting the place, right? So it is it is a very common risk. At the same time, uh, whichever way you take enough caution, this is very much possible, right? So this falls within the ambit of public liability insurance. So like this, premises and operations is one of the main cause for a liability to arise in a business. Now, the first one that we saw really was premises and operations. Now we move on to product. Now, how can the products that are manufactured cause liability? So right now, when we look at products, it can be a faulty product. It can be a product that does not meet the purpose for which it was manufactured, or it can be causing some harmful injury, or some kind of mm, mental trauma or physical injury to the people who use it. So all these are examples where any number of cases have been filed against businesses to pay compensation for use of such defaulted products. So one such example in this case is this is a beverage bottle. If you see the bottle lids were faulty in this case, so there were leakages, and the it was not just about the product itself, but it went on to create a lot of what to say, the entire commodity was it got how do I say, contaminated. So because of faulty bottle lids, the whole content that was stored in these bottles was contaminated, and over a period they were sold out in the market, and many people complained of lot of diseases arising out of use of this beverage. And this is an international case, but this was a serious case where many claims were lodged against the business owner. Another classic example, as recent as 2017 was a woman who won a court suit against a very famous coffee shop for $1 lakh. So this is a kind of compensation that you can expect a business owner will need to pay. So this was again a faulty cup, and it was no other than Starbucks, and the coffee was so hot that the person who was using the coffee, it had a faulty cup and had gotten poured the coffee onto himself and herself, and she made a claim against the business owner, and she was awarded $1 lakh as compensation. So this is how a product can lead to a liability situation, right? So right now we've seen two aspects of how liability can arise. First was the premises and operations, whereby any visitor visiting the premises of the business can get either injured, or he has parked his vehicle, he has kept his property that can get damaged within the premises, right? So, or it can be a fatal accident as well. So not only a visitor on the premises of the factory, but also the public that resides around also can have many kind of exposures in terms of illnesses or death. So all these are also liability. And the second one that we saw was use of faulty product. So the third aspect where many business owners do have a challenge in terms of liability is service. So we spoke about products, right? Now there's also a lot of companies which deal with services, which can be again faulty. So in this scenario, it need not be just business owners. It can be even individual professionals. So all your individual professionals like engineers or doctors, right? Or your legal practitioners or your chartered accountants, all the independent professionals, while they offer their professional services, if they end up doing some misguidance or some kind of harm to the clients that they service, And if this can be proved in the court of law, then there's a clear-cut liability that arises on them. So for this also, there is a huge requirement for liability insurance in the market. Now, other than individual professionals, there can be an IT company, right, which is offering IT services, software services, or it can be any. Nowadays, the most common I'm hearing in the market is these forensic experts. Now we have cyber crime all around us. So the forensic experts are expected to be offering certain services, right? And if you know the kind of liability that is attaching in case they are not able to meet the requirements is just extraordinary. So similarly, any companies, if you talk about companies, we can talk about the mainly the IT industry, software companies. So here what happens whenever you talk about an IT company, what do they actually do? They handle sensitive data of their clients. They handle very, in fact, it can be the data that belongs to the corporate itself, or it can be the data that belongs to the corporate's clients also, a third party. So very, very sensitive data. And in case as a software company, you're developing a software for your customer and you are, you handle sensitive data of your customer. And if there is any kind of data breach, then you have to pay hugely, right? You have to pay very hugely because these are very sensitive data. So we know, right? So nowadays, like I was just talked about cyber, there's so much possibility the data breach can happen, right? Anybody can what to say, hack your data and breach it. So a personalized data, when we say, we can talk about bank records, we can talk about health records of the employees, or any other software development that you are dealing with. It can be even the IP, the proprietary rights, or a business code, which is the ultimate for any business, isn't it? So if they have a certain business strategy or code, which is as an IT company, you hold it because you need to develop a software, and if that gets breached, I think you had it, right? So hacking and extortion, or even data breaches, which are not intentional also, it can, it's not that you are purposely doing it, but it happens, right? So it can be by some a planned hacker also, because there are common hackers. You might get exposed to that kind of hack also. Any kind of data breach, any kind of hacking that happens, both unintentional and intended, can result in huge liability for service companies. So they also look forward to liability insurance in a big way. Now, moving on to services, like I said, engineering experts. So let's say they give some expert advice on a construction model or a plan for how the installation of machinery should be done. Now, if there is some faulty construction on site, that also can expose risks, right? So if, see, one thing about liability I want you to understand is all these ifs and buts have to be proved in a court of law. So there is something called burden of proof whenever you talk about liability insurance, onus of proof or burden of proof. So as per law, now one thing is, if I have to claim for liability as a compensation, the onus of proving that I deserve to be compensated is on the claimant. See, if let's say I have gone into the premises of an industry and I got injured, I am the claimant. I am going to be seeking compensation. But the law says that I have the burden to prove that I got injured because of the situation that happened in the industrial premises. So the onus of proof is one important concept in liability insurance. So like this, in every case, so far, whatever we've seen, premises or product or even services, the onus of proof is always on the claimant. But there is also one beautiful subclause to this, that if the incident speaks for itself, like there's no proof needed, quite clearly it is visible that the person was in the site, or let's say we spoke about the Bhopal gas tragedy, or even the LG polymers gas leakage that happened in 2020. Now, here the incident is speaking for itself. There is no need to prove anything. In that case, the onus of proof will move to the defendant. So, in the case of LG Polymers, the onus of proving I am not liable will be on the client, which is LG Polymers. So, this is a very important concept in liability that you need to know, onus of proof. And the second aspect that you need to remember about liability insurance is no claim is paid outside, like any motor claim or fire claim, nothing is paid outside the court of law. So, any claim has to be represented by the claimant in a court, and there has to be notices served upon the industrial owner or the professional, and the liability insurance, whoever has given the insurance policy, they will also be subjected as a party, and most often the insurance company only fights the case in the court of law on behalf of their client as well. So it has to be adjudged in a court of law. There is no out of court settlement that happens. Of course, after filing the case, and because of certain delay or certain, just because the insurance company also feels, okay, if I come for out of court settlement, the claim may be less. Okay, in that case, they can come to an out of court settlement. But I want you to understand that the claim will get triggered and it will be received and intimated only when a court notice is served. So this is an important understanding that you need to know. So right now, having seen premises liability, product liability, and services liability, and we've also spoken onus of proof, which is very important, where it will be on the claimant, where it moves to the defendant, and we also spoke that it has to be through a court of law. No claims are settled just like that because of if an intimation is given by a client, it won't get settled. So moving on to the fourth aspect where the businesses are surrounded by liabilities today is corporate governance. How can corporate governance lead to liability for a business owner? Nowadays you're seeing, right, every industry or factory, they need to keep greenery around their factory. There are certain ESG environmental goals and social and development goals. So these are, we call it the 7 P's, right? So every business should not only focus on their product, people, process, but they need to focus on the planet. Environmental compliance is something that's huge burden or requirement. So if they breach any of this, they are liable to public authorities. So this is also one important aspect of liability that surrounds a business. There's something called green crime liabilities. That means many businesses have to maintain minimum carbon credits, right? Because they have a kind of activity which is in a way not a very, what to say, harmful. It deals with hazardous substances. So they need to keep their business green, and it is a minimum requirement. And if they fail there, then it would be a corporate governance liability. And of course, privacy breaches. Any kind of privacy breaches again goes back to the personal data breach. So, as a public, if you are pooling some sensitive information about the public, and if you're trying to misuse it or extend it for any other purpose other than what it is intended, then it is a privacy breach. For this also, you will get liable as a business owner to the local authorities. So this is another liability situation that happens. Now, another important liability situation is a customer and supplier information. Now, we all know that, there are every product that gets sold will have certain labeling, will have certain important information that needs to be passed on to the customer, right? So you could have situations like conditions apply, or let's say the refund policies are not, intact, or there could be many usage restrictions that you don't highlight on your product label, and because of this, if there is any harm that happens to your customers or any public, then the business owner becomes liable at the court of law. Also, supplier information. So who is a supplier? What are the contents that are there in the product? Pricing, or even in terms of usage, pricing, ingredients that are used, all these information. So these are all need to be definitely shared with the customers. Then comes the aspect of negligence. Now, when you say negligence, it's very common, isn't it? Civil law. Now, what is the clear-cut definition of negligence? When you say negligence, it is uh, you you do something which you ought not to do. So which you're supposed to be taking reasonable care when you are in a public place, or in the case of any um, incident that happens with you. So negligence is about you do something that you ought not to do. So this is any number of situations you can have, any number of cases you can have. Like in the first instance in the premises, also we discussed that if somebody negligently puts a ladder, within their office premises, and a visitor comes and topples over it and gets injured. So this is pure negligence, right? So you're supposed to take care and ensure that people who come in, walk into your office are well protected and they are taken care. But so negligence can lead to any number of liabilities around your business or as a person. Like we saw, it can be a wrongdoing, it can be also as per act. So of course we do have motor insurance, but I'm saying there are many other acts which also lead to a liability situation, and there can be contractual liabilities as well, right? So negligence can be arising out of civil law, or not only negligence, any of the liabilities so far that we have discussed, they fall under three categories. It can be under civil law, which is simple injuries or damages that happen. It can fall under a statute. Let's say if you have an employer-employee relationship, and there is an Employee Compensation Act under which, as an employer, you are responsible for a few liabilities. That is also an example. Contractual liabilities can be very many, like we saw in the case of the engineering design. So you enter into a certain service contract. Now you are bound by the terms and agreements of that contractual liability, isn't it? So if you miss out on your duties as a contract party of the contract, then you will be attached with liability. So when you talk about tort, this could be one example. A painter is carrying a painting to a gallery for appraisal. A driver jumps to curb his car. The side view mirror rips the painting out of the artist's hand into mud, destroying it. Now, this is a simple example, which is why it is called tort. It is not an intentional damage that happened to the artist's hand. So, somebody is walking with a huge painting in her hand, and a driver jumps the curb in his car, and a side view mirror rips the painting. Right? So now this is simple. Now there is no intention on behalf of the driver. There is no intention on behalf of the painter, but still the artist item has got damaged. The artist can make a claim against the driver. Right? Most of it, like if it's because it's a driver, you're aware there's something called third party property damage under motor insurance itself. But I'm saying this is a simple case of liability that arises out of tort. So this is another example where, so in both these cases, it refers to failure to exercise reasonable care. So negligence is simply this. Tort is simply this. You do something which you ought not to do, or you have not taken care which you ought to do also, both ways. So that's how a liability can arise out of tort. Right. So now moving on, having seen so many scenarios of how liabilities can arise through various buckets, some of the common products that I want to just leave you with, I'm sure all of you know, but there are any number of liability insurances that you can see today. So the most common is Public Liability Act. Then we have something called Public Liability Market Agreement. product liability, and professional indemnity. So all these are traditional products. We know they've been there for years together, isn't it? We know all these products. If some of you, I don't know, most of you are very new in my opinion, but then you know that these employee compensation, your professional indemnity, which you give for typically the professionals that we saw, like a CA or a doctor, or a lawyer. Anybody who's a professional can take this policy for rendering professional services. So these are most of them are very, very traditional products. But the recent additions, like you must have definitely heard these terminologies, which is CGL, commercial general liability, E&O, which is errors and omissions liability, D&O, which is directors and officers liability, clinical trials. Any number of clinical trials happened during this COVID, isn't it? There were so many people who were tested the vaccines, and they underwent the entire supervision for almost 3-4 months of how the vaccine is working on you. So these are clinical trials, and all those specimen or the people who took up this, if something happens to them, then compensation has to be paid. This is clearly actually negotiated at the time of administering the vaccine or medicine on them also. But I'm saying even the liability that may get attached, people take insurance for. So this is clinical trial liability insurance. Then you have event liability. Any number of events are happening nowadays, of course, mostly virtual events, but you have the music events, or you have public events, government events. All these also can lead to a lot of public liability situation, commotion. It can be just serious mob that can happen because of the event, because of which people get injured, or they die. So there is a liability situation. The person who's conducting the event will be liable. So like this, there are various products that are available in the market, and this is since this is a very, very introductory webinar, we wanted to expose you to how a liability can arise on a business or a professional or an individual, and what are the list of total number of policies that are available today in the market. So right now, this is a short webinar. We intend doing a series of webinars, and we will be having the next round of webinar on one or two of these products. So you could walk into the next series of webinar to see about each of these products, right? So I hope today you're able to take away something in terms of the need and scope for liability insurance, right? So it's important that we look at it step by step. We don't jump into the product directly. So right now we know the various means and methods by which a liability can actually arise. So going forward, you can either walk into our free webinars. We will be doing short webinars. If you have that kind of time constraint, you can walk in. But if you really want to get an in-depth understanding of each of these products in terms of what are the nuances, how is the market today, how is the sum insured arrive, how is the entire practical aspect that happens, then of course we do have a detailed 6-hour liability insurance course that we offer, which is also coming up. You can look up our calendar on the website and you can enroll. So we encourage you to walk into our free webinars and see if it's just half an hour, so it's fun for us also to offer what we know, and I'm sure you also make the best use of it. So please make a note of all our upcoming free webinars and also the courses on our website, which is www.iracoaching.com. If you found this webinar useful, please spread the word and let people know who need to know, who will also make use of such webinars. So right now, I think we will conclude the session here. We will encourage you, and we'd love to be, stay connected with you for future programs as well. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you soon in the next.